The rain poured steadily over the streets of Portland, turning sidewalks into slick rivers of reflections from neon signs and car headlights. Emma Carter tugged her coat tighter around her shoulders as she hurried through the crowded streets, her umbrella already dripping water onto the ground. She had just finished a long shift at the hospital, and her body ached from hours of standing and helping patients, yet she somehow welcomed the chill. The rain had a way of clearing her mind, washing away the stress she carried. But today, something unusual caught her attention. A man, struggling to carry a large cardboard box up the steps of a small, cozy bookstore, was fighting against the rain and the slick wood. The box was clearly heavy, and his coat was soaked, clinging to his frame. Emma hesitated for only a second before hurrying toward him. "Here, let me help you," she said, grabbing one side of the box. He looked up at her, startled, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. His deep blue eyes, a little weary but sharp, met hers. There was a softness there, an unspoken vulnerability that made her chest tighten. "Oh, thank you." "I didn't expect anyone to stop," he replied, his voice quiet but sincere. Emma smiled, shrugging off the slight awkwardness of the moment. "I'm just lucky I was walking by," she said. Together, they lifted the box carefully and carried it inside the small bookstore. The smell of old books, mixed with coffee and faint wood polish, enveloped her immediately. She felt a curious warmth, despite the chill that had followed them indoors. He set the box down gently, brushing the rain off his sleeves. "I'm Nathan Brooks," he said, smiling faintly. "I run this place. We'll try to keep it running anyway." Kay's laugh was soft and a little self-deprecating, and Emma felt an unexpected tug at her heart. Kay? There was something fragile in him, something that seemed in need of care, and she found herself wanting to be the one to offer it. "I'm Emma Carter," she said, shaking his hand. The moment lingered slightly longer than it should have, just long enough to make the air between them feel charged with something unspoken. Nathan's gaze softened, almost shyly, as if he were deciding whether to invite her into his world. Over the next few days, Emma couldn't stop thinking about him. It wasn't just the striking blue of his eyes or the gentle way he had handled the box. It was the sense that he was quietly struggling and yet refusing to ask for help in any obvious way. The thought made her want to see him again, even if only to check that he was okay. A week later, she found herself walking past the bookstore again. The rain had cleared, leaving the streets glistening under a late afternoon sun. On impulse, she stepped inside. Nathan was there, arranging books on a low shelf. His hands moved with care, his attention entirely on the task. Yet there was a slight tension in his shoulders. "Hi," she said softly. He looked up, his face brightening in a way that made her heart flutter. "Emma, I didn't expect to see you here," he said, sounding genuinely pleased. "Come in. Can I get you a coffee?" She nodded, and they settled in a small corner of Tate. "I like the store." Nathan poured her a cup, his hands slightly shaking from the cold or perhaps from nerves. And she couldn't help but notice the lines of fatigue around his eyes. They talked about books, about the city, and about little things in life trivial at first. But as the conversation went on, it became personal, warm, and surprisingly intimate. As the days turned into weeks, Emma found herself stopping by the bookstore more often. Sometimes she helped rearrange shelves, dusted books that had collected too much rain-soaked dirt, or organized displays. Other times, she simply stayed to chat, sharing stories from her life as a nurse, her family in Seattle, or small anecdotes from her childhood. Nathan, in turn, shared pieces of himself he didn't often reveal. He told her about his late wife, about the divorce that had left him cautious and weary, about nights he stayed awake worrying whether the bookstore could survive. It wasn't. Long before Nathan began asking for her advice more directly. One evening, after she had helped move a particularly heavy stack of books, he stopped her as she was leaving. "Emma, could you stay a minute? I could use some advice on the store. Things aren't going well, and I'm not sure what to do next." Emma's heart skipped a beat. The vulnerability in his voice was different, now deeper, more earnest. It wasn't just about the store. It was about him letting someone in, allowing her to see a part of his life he normally kept private. Of course, she said softly, feeling an unexpected warmth spread through her chest. They sat together, discussing strategies for attracting more customers, organizing events, and even redesigning the layout to make the store more inviting. Emma's practical suggestions were met with gratitude. But it was the way he listened, really listened, that made her feel valued in a way she hadn't felt in years. Nathan's eyes met hers several times during their conversation, lingering longer than necessary, as though silently asking for her presence beyond the simple advice she offered. After that evening, she noticed a subtle change in how Nathan interacted with her. He began inviting her for small moments beyond the store coffee at a nearby cafe, walks in the park, even just sitting on the bookstore's worn steps, sharing stories of their day. Each invitation carried a quiet intimacy, a gentle pull toward something neither of them had yet named. One late afternoon, as Emma was leaving after helping Nathan reorganize some delivery boxes, he hesitated. "Emma, would you maybe come back tomorrow? I could use your help again. I don't know what I'd do without you," he said, his voice catching slightly. Emma felt a flutter of emotion, a mix of pride, concern, and something more complicated that she couldn't yet identify. "I'll be here," she replied, smiling, though her heart raced as she walked home. The streets wet and glimmering under the evening lights, she couldn't stop replaying Nathan's words in her mind. There was a longing in him that mirrored a longing she hadn't recognized in herself. She felt drawn to him in a way that was both exciting and frightening. The thought of helping him, spending time with him, and maybe even becoming someone important in his life filled her with warmth, but also with anticipation. Over the next few days, their routine deepened. Emma would stop by the store in the mornings before her shifts, offer advice on displays, or just sit quietly while Nathan worked on paperwork. Sometimes they shared silence that felt charged with meaning. Other times they laughed over minor mishaps, like a misplaced shelf or a stubborn box of books. Then came the day that would change the dynamic completely. Nathan closed the store early, asking Emma to stay after her morning shift. She found him sitting at this small wooden table near the front, his hands folded and his expression unusually serious. "Emma, I need your help with something more than just the store," he said, his voice low and hesitant. She tilted her head, concerned. "What is it?" she asked, her heart beating faster. Nathan looked at her vulnerability written across his face. "I've been struggling. I've been trying to manage everything on my own after my divorce, and sometimes it's overwhelming. I guess I just don't know how to ask for help, except I'm asking you now. I trust you." Emma felt a lump in her throat. She hadn't expected this level of honesty, this level of intimacy so soon, and yet something in her wanted to reach out to hold him and reassure him that he wasn't alone. "Nathan, you don't have to face this alone. I'm here. I'll help you however I can," she said, her voice steady despite the rush of emotion she felt inside. He gave a small, relieved smile, one that made her heart ache in a strange, tender way. There was a softness in him now, an openness she hadn't seen before, and she felt honored that he trusted her enough to let her in. From that moment, their connection grew subtly but unmistakably. Each interaction, each conversation, and each shared moment built a quiet intimacy that neither had anticipated. Nathan's requests for help became invitations for closeness. He would ask for her advice, then linger a little longer, sharing stories, confiding fears, and gradually revealing layers of himself that had been hidden for years. Emma found herself looking forward to these moments more than she expected. The sound of his voice, the way his eyes softened when he spoke to her, the quiet gratitude in his gestures, all of it made her feel alive, wanted, and needed in a way she hadn't realized she craved. By the time the week ended, Emma understood that what had begun as a simple act of helping a stranger had blossomed into something far deeper. Nathan wasn't just a man struggling with a bookstore. He was someone who had touched her heart, and she had touched his in return. The thought left her both exhilarated and slightly nervous, as if stepping into unknown territory. And though neither of them said it aloud, both Emma and Nathan knew that this was only the beginning. What started with a box, a rainy afternoon, and a simple act of kindness was about to grow into something far more complicated and far more beautiful than either of them had imagined. Even as Emma walked home that night, city lights reflecting off the wet streets, she felt a sense of anticipation, a flutter in her chest that whispered, this was just the start. He had accepted her help, and soon he would ask for more. The days after Nathan's quiet confession passed in a blur of routine and small, meaningful moments. Emma Carter found herself arriving at the bookstore earlier than usual, eager to see him, though she tried not to admit it to herself. Nathan seemed different now, more open, more willing to let someone into his world, and she felt a warmth in her chest every time. He looked at her with those blue eyes that held both gratitude and something deeper. Nathan had begun to lean on her more, asking not just for help with the store, but for advice on life, on choices, on moments when he felt unsure. He would sit across from her at the small wooden table, hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee, and talk quietly about things he had never shared with anyone before. Emma listened, offered gentle words, and often left feeling a strange mix of fulfillment and longing. One afternoon, Nathan invited her to help rearrange the back room, a space filled with old storage boxes and forgotten shelves. The room smelled faintly of dust and old paper, but Emma found herself smiling at the thought of spending time there with him. As they lifted boxes and stacked them carefully, their hands brushed more than once, and each time a small spark seemed to pass between them. Neither spoke of it, but the tension was there, subtle and unspoken, filling the corners of the room with electricity after the work was done. Nathan leaned against a shelf, wiping his hands on a towel. Emma, I know I ask a lot of you, he said quietly, almost ashamed. Not just for help with the store, but with everything. I don't mean to be a burden. Emma shook her head, smiling softly. You're not a burden. I like being here. I like helping you, and I like being around you. Her words hung in the air, heavier than she intended. Nathan's eyes flicked to hers, and for a moment, silence stretched between them, full of meaning neither dared to voice. It wasn't long before Nathan started inviting her for little outings outside the bookstore. A walk through the nearby park where the leaves were turning gold and the crisp autumn air made them laugh and shiver together. A visit to a local cafe where he would share stories of his childhood in Seattle. Tales of small triumphs and quiet heartbreaks, and she would laugh, sometimes wiping tears from her eyes at the honesty of his recollections. Each outing brought them closer, the line between friendship and something more slowly dissolving with every shared story and gentle touch. One rainy evening, Nathan closed the store early. He'd asked Emma to stay after her shift, and she found him waiting by the front desk, a nervous energy radiating from him that made her pulse quicken. Emma, I need your help again, he said, his voice low and hesitant. But this time, it's more personal. I haven't told anyone this before, and I don't know how to say it. Emma sat down across from him, her hands folded on her lap. You can tell me anything, she said gently, her heart already anticipating the depth of what he might reveal. Nathan took a deep breath. I've been alone for a long time. After my divorce, I tried to focus on the bookstore, on all work, on anything to keep my mind occupied. But there are nights I feel completely lost. I've been scared of letting anyone in because I thought I'd only end up hurt again. But with you, Emma, I feel like maybe I don't have to face it alone. Emma felt a wave of emotion sweep over her. She reached across the table, placing her hand on his. It was a simple gesture, Yet it carried a weight of comfort, understanding, and quiet reassurance. Nathan, you don't have to face it alone. Not anymore. I'm here. For you. Always. Nathan's hand covered hers, his thumb brushing over her knuckles in a way that made her chest tighten. I I want that, he whispered. I want you with me. Not just helping, but being here in my life. The weeks that followed were filled with a new kind of closeness. Nathan began to trust Emma with his fears, his dreams, and his doubts. He would confide in her late at night, sharing stories of his past, moments of embarrassment, and small victories. He asked her opinion on everything from minor store decisions to questions about relationships, life, and happiness. Each request was a step, a bridge drawing them together in a bond that was tender, delicate, and profoundly real. Emma, in turn, found herself opening up to him in ways she hadn't with anyone else. She spoke of the exhaustion of her job, the loneliness that sometimes crept in during quiet nights, and the longing for connection she had hidden behind smiles and small talk. Nathan listened with patience and care, never judging, never dismissing, always offering a presence that was steady, kind, and reassuring. One afternoon, as they were cataloging a shipment of new books, their hands met repeatedly over the stacks, lingering just a moment too long. A small laugh escaped Nathan, breaking the tension, and Emma felt herself smiling in response, her heart hammering. You're always so careful with everything, she teased, trying to mask the flutter in her chest. And yet I'm careless with you, he replied softly, almost under his breath. She looked at him, startled by the honesty in his tone, and their eyes locked. The air between them was charged, electric, and for the first time, both realized that the connection they had cultivated had moved beyond friendship, beyond support. That evening, after Emma had finished helping him organize the final boxes for the week, Nathan asked her to sit with him. He had brewed tea, and the warmth of the cups in their hands mirrored the warmth growing between them. Emma, I don't just want your help anymore. I want you in my life fully. I don't want to be alone again, and I don't want to face anything without you. Emma's breath caught. She had felt it too, the pull, the quiet longing that had been building over weeks of small touches, shared laughter, and confessions. Nathan, I want that too, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. From that night on, their relationship shifted into a new rhythm. Their mornings began with shared coffee in the back room, conversations that lasted longer than necessary, and laughter that filled every corner of the bookstore. Days were spent side by side, cataloging books, rearranging shelves, or just talking quietly in corners where the sunlight fell softly through the windows. Each moment was a discovery of each other, of themselves, and of the fragile beauty, of trust and intimacy. Nathan's vulnerability became a source of connection rather than burden. He shared his fears of failure, of losing the store, of repeating past mistakes. And Emma offered reassurance, ideas, and emotional support. In turn, she revealed her own uncertainties, her longing for love and companionship, and the exhaustion of a life spent caring for others. Together, they found balance, a partnership rooted in care, respect, and a slow-burning attraction that neither had expected. Autumn turned to winter, and the bookstore became a haven against the chill outside. The soft glow of lamps illuminated stacks of books, creating pockets of warmth where Emma and Nathan could linger. They would talk late into the evening, sometimes over tea, sometimes just sitting quietly, enjoying the comfort of being together. The moments between them grew heavier with unspoken understanding, a gentle tension that neither rushed but both felt deeply. One evening, after a particularly long day, Nathan asked Emma to close the store with him. As they pushed the last cart of books into place, he turned to her, his expression earnest. Emma, I know this is sudden, but I can't imagine my life without you now. You're here for me in ways no one else has ever been. And I think I'm falling for you. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had felt it too, the careful pull of her feelings growing each day, the moments of longing she tried to ignore. Nathan, I felt the same, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly, but with certainty. He reached for her hand, holding it firmly, yet tenderly. Outside, the city lights reflected off the wet streets, a quiet glow that matched the warmth she felt inside. For the first time in a long while, both felt secure, not just in each other's company, but in the bond that had grown from shared moments, quiet trust, and unwavering support. Weeks turned into months, and their connection only deepened. Nathan's requests for help had evolved into invitations for partnership, companionship, and eventually love. The bookstore, once a place of struggle and stress, became a sanctuary where both found solace, joy, and a sense of belonging. Every shelf they organized, every cup of coffee shared, and every laugh exchanged strengthened the bond they had formed. Emma realized that helping Nathan had become more than an act of kindness. It was a shared journey of growth, trust, and emotional intimacy. She was no longer just a helper. She was a partner, a confidant, and eventually, something far more significant in his life. One winter evening, snow began to fall softly outside. They stood together by the front window, hands intertwined. Nathan looked at her, eyes shining with quiet emotion. Emma, thank you for being here, for everything, for me. Emma smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. I should be the one thanking you, Nathan, for letting me in, for trusting me, for being you. And in that moment, the journey that had begun with a simple act of help had transformed into a love that felt gentle, real, and entirely theirs. The quiet bookstore, the rain-soaked streets, and the long conversations had created a space where two hearts, once alone and hesitant, found each other completely. He had asked for help, and she had given it.